Hello, and welcome to Cooking with Arnold, the only show that terminates your hunger. Oh, hey Arnold. I'm glad you're back this week. Our guest is actually the Graveyard Kitchen. I know. I'm making one of her recipes right now. Oh, cool. Which one? Mom's lasagna from the Layers of Unknown Story. Oh, right, yeah. Day 11 of Sinister Suppers, I believe. That's awesome. Do you need any help? Yeah. I need to know where the file is. I'm sorry, the file? Yeah, the DA is trying to pin it on me. I didn't do it! Oh, wait, you're talking about the story, aren't you? I was asking if you needed help with the recipe. Wait, recipe? What are you talking about? The lasagna. Aren't you making it? Why do you have your kitchen set up here? No! My lasagna is burning! Okay, just relax. I'll get the fire extinguisher. No time! We have to get to the chopper! Okay, you know what? I'll handle this while we play the intro music. Welcome, everyone, to a delicious episode of the Saved as Draft podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of the Saved as Draft podcast. I normally try to switch up the voices I use in these opening skits, but I was known back in high school for a little improv comedy series called Cooking with Arnold that would air just about every day at the lunch table when I was in school. I wish I was kidding. But honestly, people loved my Arnold voice back then, and they loved watching him mess up recipes, so that was a thing in my friend group. And, as I mentioned in the opening skit, this week's featured guest is the Graveyard Kitchen, who sent in written answers for the prompt goddess to read on the show. So, Cooking with Arnold felt like the best option out of my comedy repertoire for this episode's opener. And yes, the Graveyard Kitchen combines gothic short stories with delicious recipes from a farmhouse kitchen. It's an incredible way of putting together cooking and storytelling in exciting and unique ways. I'm a big fan of this publication, and I'm excited for everyone to learn more about the person behind these recipe/story hybrids later in the show. A little housekeeping this week. I just finished the 4th Divine Prelude, and my article on writing battle scenes is finally out as well. I'm ramping up production on a few other projects, so my reduced publication schedule will be in effect starting this week, but things like the podcast and power-up prompts will still be here every Friday and Saturday, respectively. Beyond that, I'll be publishing new content 1 to 2 times a week, and more as I'm able. For today's episode, we've got our weekly shoutouts, a look at some of the stories for this week's power-up prompt, and a few set in Divine as well with that bonus challenge that I had, and then we'll get into part 2 of our discussion on writing battle scenes using tips from my recent article that I published this past week. Don't forget to check the show notes for a link to that full article with 10 tips on writing epic battle scenes. I really think it's helpful, and I hope it is. After that, we'll hear from the prompt goddess Sarah Rush as she reads interview answers from the Graveyard Kitchen, and then we'll round things off with some questions for Voidy and a look at next week on Substack. That's all I've got for the intro here, so let's dive into this week's shoutouts. Every week on Tuesdays, I open a thread in my subscriber chat for people to share links for the chance to be featured here on the show. I also shared those same links with Mina Howell and her Penny Dreadfuls podcast. We had a bunch of folks submit links this week, and I've selected 5 at random, so let's jump in and see what we got. First this week is Antara 003 Transubstantiation by J.L.G. Noga. Antara is a series that collects short stories and flash fiction across crime, horror, literary, magical realism, thriller, and satire genres, with a focus on various Asian cultures. Each piece is also set in the eponymous city and can be read in any order. As someone who likes to experiment with different formats and forms of storytelling, this piece immediately spoke to me with the way that it mixes in different mediums of writing. We start with a company document filled with redacted lines, and then we move on to transcripts of text messages and even call transcripts as well. The characters here are incredibly authentic right off the bat. The writing in the messages and the transcripts is so natural that I felt like I was actually violating someone's privacy. It's hard to describe just how authentic it all feels. There's a note in the beginning about how text that has been struck through indicates messages that were sent but later deleted, and this is used brilliantly throughout as well. Honestly, I'm just truly blown away by the quality of the formatting here, and you throw in the insanely authentic character development, and that's just the cherry on top. It's amazing stuff. Normally, I would read an excerpt here, but a lot of this story's impact comes from the visual elements, like the redacted text and the formatting that I mentioned. So, do yourself a favor, check it out. There's a link in the show notes, and trust me, it's well worth your time. Second this week is The Naked Truth About Memoir, or Any Writing, by Michelle Ray. This piece really blew me away as well. It opens with an anecdote about a late-night swim after several drinks, but it quickly becomes a piece that pulls in different aspects and input from the community to discuss the nature of memoirs as a form of writing. Early on in the piece, Michelle placed a screenshot from a note she posted a few weeks ago. It reads as follows. Writing memoir feels like slowly undressing in a crowded room. It scares the crap out of me because what if no one wanted to see me naked in the first place? To the memoirists out there, is it worth it? She gathered nearly 40 responses, and she includes many of them here in this piece, including tags to give credit for each response's author. It's incredible to see how many people showed up to offer their perspectives, but not only that, the support here is also unwavering. The piece caps off with some discussion about how all writing requires us to be vulnerable. And there's another quote here from Mary Carr that reads, "Be fearless about telling the truth, because that's where the rich writing is going to come from." Amazing. Michelle's piece here is truly inspiring. It's rich with beautiful takeaways for writers of all kinds, not just those that write memoirs. And as always with her work, it's unapologetically honest and genuine, which I appreciate. Honestly, I love it whenever her work shows up here, and I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't read any of her stuff before. Check the show notes for a link. Third this week is Obey Gravity, It's the Law by Joshua Hillary. This is my first time reading Joshua's work, and I am just continuously impressed by the talent here on Substack, because this story was amazing. It establishes a thick atmosphere right from the get-go, and the protagonist is immediately relatable. He's having a bad day, and things just keep piling up as they often do. A lot of it has to do with this van that cut him off and then stole his parking space when he got home. Fed up, he decides to break into the car, only for the owner to show up once he has it open. What follows is a tense conversation that perfectly captures the van owner's strange personality with pitch-perfect dialogue. You can also feel a sense of growing dread as you're reading, and even the moments when the story tries to disarm the tension with comedy don't do enough to completely put you at ease. The tension builds and builds until we get this wild and incredibly unique reveal in the final moments. It's a brilliantly written horror story with a fascinating body horror element. If you're a fan of horror, it's a must-read, I'll be honest. It's one of the best I've seen in a while. Check out this excerpt to get an idea of what's in store. I slam my head on the roof of the car. Red-hot pain pulses down along the cracks and grooves of my brain. I turn around and 3 bone-thin men are standing in front of me. Scratch that. 1 bone-thin man is standing in front of me, his hands on his hips, his beakish nose sitting right between my eyes. He aggressively pushes his glasses up his thin bridge with a single finger, and for a split second, his eyes peek over at the door and then dart back. He's probably looking at the spot where my knife had cut little hairs on the door crease. Although paranoia might be getting the better of me. He brushes his corduroy sport coat with his hands. He looks like a child, wearing his father's hand-me-down. "May I assist you with something?" I groan. You left a light on." "Oh," he says in a facetious manner. I was just... Oh no, please. You don't have to explain. My van has a propensity for inspiring curiosity. One could say curiosity is the molecular building block of this confounded creation, he says, slapping his hand on the hood of his van as if it were a good friend's shoulder. It's a bit longer of an excerpt than I normally do on here, but I wanted to capture that interplay between the prose and the dialogue. I love how it builds character development while stacking on that sense of dread that I mentioned, and it's just a phenomenal horror story. Check the show notes for a link. This one is really good. Fourth this week is 30 Days of Fantasy, a writing challenge for the Wonder Hungry by Luna Astley Kolsu. I caught wind of this upcoming challenge the other day, and I wanted to mention it on the podcast, so I'm really happy that it came up during my random shout-out selection this week. This challenge is being hosted on Luna's Found in Between Pages publication, and features 30 days of fantasy prompts. These prompts welcome high fantasy, cozy fantasy, folk horror, and everything in between, which I love. Here's a little excerpt from Luna about what inspired the challenge. Something's been tugging at me lately. Not a story, but the shape of one. Not a character, but the echo of a voice. A pull toward the unreal, toward something a little wilder, a little older, a little more alive than the world we're told to live in. So this July, I'm opening a door. Amazing. I'm excited to check out some of these prompts. My fantasy realm of Devine is always looking for new tales and inspiration, after all. This challenge is running for the entirety of July, so it's already underway. You can jump in and out as well, just like how I've done with my challenges back in February and May of this year. It's amazing to see others in the community taking up the prompt mantle and hosting challenges like this, so please, show Luna your support and check it out. There'll be a link in the show notes. Our final shout-out this week is Maroli Tango Chapter 1 by author John G. Dyer. Maroli Tango is a serialized novel that John G. Dyer is releasing one chapter at a time here on Substack, and it's actually the third book in a sci-fi space opera trilogy that he's been writing and publishing. The third book is described as a genre-bending tale of life, love, and uncertain outcomes. This first chapter introduces us to Carmen Benekista and gives us a look at her past and upbringing before revealing that she is now the president of the United States in this world. I won't spoil anything else here, but it's clear there's a lot of rich lore and backstory to this world. The writing is sharp, and the first chapter only takes a few minutes to read. With 44 chapters and counting, it's also something you can really dive into if you'd like. Here's an excerpt I enjoyed. In 1994, a Jewish matchmaker introduced her to Anton Benekista, heir apparent to a New Jersey real estate title insurance company. Anton was steady, focused, reliable. The marriage a satisfactory arrangement until he died of metastasized cancer at the age of 47, leaving Carmen and their 17-year-old daughter to the charity of his parents, who assumed Carmen's stake in the family business on the high side and bought her out. Thus was Carmen Benekista granted the means to become active in politics, and then, having earned recognition as a populist firebrand, to ultimately find herself elected president of the United States. I love how we lead right into that moment where we find out who Carmen is and her role in this world. Check the show notes for a link, and thank you as always to everyone for submitting your links. Remember to check my subscriber chat every Tuesday for that weekly shoutouts thread. Next up this week is our Power Up Prompt Level 3 Story Shoutouts. I missed a couple of Power Up Prompt stories last week, so I'm figuring out better ways to collect those links so they don't get lost. But in the meantime, never hesitate to send me a message or tag me if you haven't seen me mention or acknowledge your story, especially if it's level 3 each week. That being said, shout out to LG Wells for his hilarious story for Power Up Prompt 2 called The Bog of Blushing Secrets. It's a wild and comedic adventure with one of the best openings I've ever seen. I'll have a link in the show notes, and keep your eyes out because I plan to do something with this story in partnership with LG involving narration in the future. I also missed Kaylee Robinson's story, Cursed by Night, Crowned by Day, last week, which was an excellent take on the prompt that wildly subverts expectations by the end. Kaylee submitted a story this week as well that I'll talk about shortly, so check out both her links in this week's episode show notes. Okay, now, this week's Level 3 stories used fantasy, floating isles, a mysterious stranger, and the return of magic. I also had a bonus challenge to set your story in Devine. Now, being that today is a holiday in the United States, if you're working on a story for this prompt and you end up publishing over the weekend, let me know, and I will include it in next week's episode before we cover those stories, especially if you decide to set one in Devine. Alright, first up this week is Telluria's Awakening by Kira Finley. Kira introduced us to her Jade Dreamer trilogy universe recently when she published her debut short story, and I was immediately blown away by the richness and unique elements of her fantasy universe. This week's story set in that same universe is no different. The standout element here for me, though, was something called a Blood Eater, which was introduced in this story. It's a terrifying creature that can taste the blood of living things and tell you if there's magic in their veins. If that sounds terrifying and interesting in equal measure, then you need to check out Telluria's Awakening at the link in the show notes. Our next Level 3 story this week is The Rise of the Floating Isles, Part 1 by Kaylee Robinson. Now, I've read a lot of Kaylee's work recently, and one thing that I've noticed is that her stories always bring superb pacing along with rich, believable characters, and they perfectly capture this sense of emotion, mystery, and intrigue effortlessly each time. It's amazing. The Rise of the Floating Isles, Part 1 is no different. It starts with some excellent world building, but then uses our stranger character from the prompt particularly well, as it weaves a tale of how the world became fractured, and more importantly, what happened to magic. Since this is part 1, it does have quite the cliffhanger, but I highly recommend it, and I love it when writers are so inspired by the prompt that it leads to an entire series, so that's always an honor to see, and I'm really excited for part 2 here. Third this week is a story that went for level 3 and included the bonus challenge to set itself in my fantasy sci-fi realm of Devine. Unseen Consequences by Mina Howell is a must-read if you're a fan of my realm of Devine. Mina has been a die-hard Devine fan since I met her earlier this year, and every time she does one of these Devine challenges, she always manages to introduce something to the realm that I plan on using in my own Devine tales. If that's not a sign of a writer that truly knows your world, I don't know what is. In this story, Mina introduces some fascinating new elements to Devine regarding the realm's reaction to recent major events, which results in quakes that create the floating isles from this week's prompt. More so, she chose to have the stranger be someone or something that uses magic and emerges from the depths of the Endarian Expanse, which is an endless ocean surrounding Devine that is said to hold the secrets of the old gods. I love this story from beginning to end, and I'm seriously going to have to borrow The Stranger in the upcoming Devine series, The Order of the Pawn, so you may want to check this one out if you're a fan of the realm, and you can find a link in the show notes. Next up this week is another level 3 story also set in Devine. Unexpected Hero by Jimmy Daleson reminds me a lot of an early Devine tale that I did called A Soul Bound to Steal, which also featured an expedition of treasure hunters. This was Jimmy's first Devine tale, and I feel like they did an amazing job of incorporating some of the lore while also forging their own elements. And, of course, it includes elements of sci-fi and fantasy, which Devine is known for. I love the interaction between the characters and the backstory that we get about the crew as the story goes on. The dialogue cleverly introduces some new world building around the dwarves, who've only shown up a few times in my own Devine tales. Once more, I'm honored and overjoyed to see someone step into Devine and do such a great job at portraying the realm. Jimmy did a great job with this piece, so check the show notes for a link. Our last level 3 story for this week's power-up prompt is The Skyward Wake by Andres McColloim. This is a new author to me, but this story was an amazing first impression. The writing is immediately atmospheric, lyrical, and honestly has some stunningly beautiful lines throughout. It leverages the prompt's elements really well, especially the stranger character. The sense of intrigue, the danger in the air, it's all very compelling from the get-go. The story also leaps into action pretty quickly, and before you know it, the fate of the world is at stake. It gets you invested fast, which I really loved. The ending is also heartfelt and vivid. It's just an exceptionally well-written piece, with some powerful emotions and a lot of standout lines, like I said. I'm really impressed. Check the show notes for a link. And of course, stay tuned for next week's power-up prompt coming tomorrow, July 5th. Our poll this week landed on horror, so we'll be doing that genre for this next one. Next up is this week's writing discussion. Last week, I shared 3 tips from my article about writing battle scenes. This week, I'll be sharing 3 more straight from the piece that I published. Even if you've heard all 6, though, there's still 10 tips total in the full article, so make sure you check the show notes for a link to read the whole thing. All that aside, the first tip I have for this week, for writing epic battle scenes, is to remember you're not writing a movie. If you're like me, you have a mental catalog of fight scenes or battle scenes from movies that you've enjoyed over the years in your head. There are so many, and plenty of them do an incredible job of capturing the spectacle and chaos of warfare, but that's just it. They're all about spectacle. Movies and TV shows are a visual medium, so it makes sense that they would lean into the spectacle of it all, but this is not where prose and writing shines. In fact, the more you focus on details in your battle scenes, the more you'll slow down the pacing of the fight overall. While film and TV are good at providing visual details, prose has the benefit of being able to deliver other types of information quickly to the reader. For example, depending on your POV, you can give the reader a direct line to the inner thoughts of the character. So don't fall into the trap of trying to create a Hollywood-style cinematic spectacle on the page, because what you'll end up doing is feeding the reader way too much visual information, and that will kill the excitement and pacing pretty quick. All of that being said, I did get a great comment on my article about writing battle scenes, where someone said that they tell their creative writing students to visualize the scene like it's a movie or a comic book for the purpose of deciding which elements are most important to the reader. Now this is very good advice, and it doesn't invalidate my tip here either. It's okay to see the scene play out in your head like a movie. In fact, I would hope that it feels like that to you. The biggest thing is just to remember that you don't need to describe every single little thing. Trust the reader's imagination to fill in some of the gaps, and focus on the important details so you keep the pacing intact. Tip number 2 is to build anticipation. Part of what makes battles so exciting in stories are the events leading up to them. There should be tension, conflict, and concern in the reader's mind as they turn the page to the day of the big event. You should consider battle scenes a pivotal moment in your character's journey as well. Everything they do should be leading to this moment. Are they nervous about the upcoming fight? Are they eager to ride into battle? Or are they going to try everything they can to avoid conflict? Giving us a look into the character's mindset prior to the conflict or showing the general state of the world around them can build anticipation as well. Even if it's a small-scale battle or a duel, you want to build that and lead up to the fight itself so that you have that excitement when you get there. Tip number 3, set the scene. Before all hell breaks loose, take a moment to set the scene for your reader. What's the weather like? What kind of terrain are they fighting on? What's the size and scope of the opposing side? And most of all, what's the atmosphere like in the moments before the fighting starts? Are the fighters all silent? Does the general give a rousing speech before they charge toward victory? Use this moment as another opportunity to further build that anticipation and tension. All these things help establish the mood and atmosphere, which will become the foundation for the battle itself. This ultimately means you'll have less to worry about when you're in the thick of it because you already set the foundation for the reader prior to the conflict. And that's my 3 tips for this week, which brings us to the end of part 2 of this discussion. But remember, you can find 10 tips total in the article over on The Writer's Journey. All right, next up is this week's featured guest interview. This week, I'm excited to welcome to the show the Graveyard Kitchen, who opted for the written interview option. I sent over questions and she responded, so now that I've got the answers, the prompt goddess Sarah Rush will come onto the show to read them, and we can find out more. Let's discover how such a unique combination of recipes and storytelling came to be, shall we? Please welcome to the show, the Graveyard Kitchen. All right, everybody, and on this week's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast, we have a new written interview from the Graveyard Kitchen. And joining me once again to read the answers on the air is the prompt goddess herself, Sarah Rush. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me yet again.
All right, so my first question for the Graveyard Kitchen was, can you tell us a little about yourself and your creative journey thus far?
I've been married for more than half of my life, which is wild to admit out loud. I have 4 teenagers. They're always hungry, bottomless pits with hollow legs, and feeding them is a full-time job. With a family of 6, eating out just isn't realistic. We live in the country, so pizza delivery isn't even an option either. Honestly, though, home-cooked food is better anyway. I cook dinner every single night and know how to stretch ingredients without skimping on taste. Right out of high school, I went into the corporate world and stayed there for about 15 years. In my late 30s, I decided to go back to college and I earned my master's degree in English when I was 40. After that, I taught high school English for about 15 years. I guess if you add all that up, I'm definitely showing my age. My creative journey really started with my grandmother. She loved psychological thrillers and used to get Alfred Hitchcock's mystery magazine in the mail every month. We'd read it together and then make up our own dark little stories. That was our thing. When I went back to school, I rediscovered writers like Edgar Allan Poe and Mary Shelley, authors who weren't afraid to explore the uglier parts of human nature. Their stories made people uncomfortable in the best way. That's what stuck with me.
Amazing, amazing. There's so much interesting stuff in there in that backstory. I love it. All right, so question number 2. At what point did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
The first story I remember writing that really felt like something was in 7th grade when I was about 12. It was for a creative writing assignment, and I came up with a girl who had the power to control minds, not to take over the world, but just to make people see her differently. She felt misunderstood, and I think I did too. I poured everything I had into it. I got a good grade and rushed home to show my grandma. She was always my biggest fan. When I went back to college in my late 30s, surrounded by students nearly 20 years younger, I ended up becoming a kind of campus mom. I started a column in the school newspaper called Advice from the Other Side of 30, of marriage, of being a mom, and I wrote it for 3 years while I was there. It was funny and honest, and students really responded to it. I loved being needed. I guess in a way, I got what that 12-year-old version of me had always wanted, to feel like I belonged somewhere and to be seen for more than just what people assumed. In my master's senior capstone course, we focused entirely on one American author, Edgar Allan Poe. The cast of Amontillado hit me hard. It was so methodical, so cold and deliberate. For my final, I wrote an essay titled The Beauty of Revenge, and it was published in the college's literary journal. That piece cemented what I already knew. I didn't just want to write, I wanted to go deep. I wanted to write stories that made people uncomfortable, stories that asked who the real villain is.
Amazing. That's incredible. The story about the piece on campus and then that essay sounds amazing too. I would love to read that. So question number 3 is, where did the idea to combine stories with recipes come from?
It actually started while I was making chili. I was thinking about how my career ended, how I left something I used to love because of people who had no idea what it meant to actually teach. And then my thoughts started spiraling. I realized I knew things about these people, things that parents, administrators, school board members probably didn't want out in the open. I could expose all of it if I really wanted to. I didn't, of course, but the idea got louder in my head. What if someone did? What if someone wrote an anonymous expose and mailed it to the local paper? I could picture it. I was dipping my cornbread into the chili, and at the same time, I had this whole twisted soap opera playing out in my head. I thought, this is kind of perfect. I hadn't seen anyone do it, combine psychological thrillers with food. That's when it came together. The stories would be dark, but grounded, and they'd all come with a recipe, like a warning or a reward, depending on how you look at it.
I love that answer, and I agree. I don't think I've ever seen a publication on Substack or anywhere else really that combines storytelling with recipes. That really blew me away when I first experienced it, and it continues to be an awesome combination. And I love that last part about the recipe being a warning or a reward. Very nice. Question 4: what sort of themes or takeaways do you hope readers get from your stories?
I want people to be invested in what I write. I want them to sit with the question, who's the villain and who's the victim? Because not all good people are good and not all bad people are bad. People can have dark tendencies and still do kind things, and sometimes the ones painted as heroes are the ones who did the most damage. Take Frankenstein's monster. He didn't choose to be stitched together from corpses. He didn't ask to be abandoned by the man who made him, or to be feared, hated, and chased out of every place he tried to belong. He just wanted a chance to live, to be accepted. But the world saw a monster before they saw a soul. So who's really to blame? Same with Medusa. Everyone remembers the snakes and the stare that turned men to stone, but no one talks about what came before. Medusa was once known for her renowned beauty until Athena, the so-called wise goddess, punished her out of jealousy. The man Athena loved didn't love her back. He loved Medusa, but Medusa wanted nothing to do with him. Medusa didn't harm anyone. She didn't start a war or curse a nation. She simply existed, and that was enough to provoke a god. Athena is remembered as noble, but what she did was cruel. So again, who's the villain? Who's the victim? That's the thread that runs through all of my stories. Things aren't always what they seem.
I love that. Yeah, those are some great examples, and I love the ambiguity there. That's fantastic. Question number 5: Where do the recipes themselves come from? Are they ones you created?
They come from my home recipe collection, tried and true throughout my life. These are meals my family of 6 actually loves, and they're all easy to make with ingredients most people already have.
Amazing. I still have to try making one of the recipes too. I'm definitely going to do that. Number 6: Do you cook a lot in your daily life? How often do you make dishes from your stories?
I cook every night. With 4 teenagers, home cooked meals are a must. Some of the recipes are in heavier rotation than others, but every single one has been tested, approved, and requested again by my kids. That's how I know they're good.
That's fantastic. Question 7: What initially drew you to Substack?
I had never even heard of Substack. I literally Googled, where can I write real stories for teachers about teachers without having to say my name, something that's not Facebook or Instagram? Substack came up. At first, the Graveyard Kitchen wasn't even the name. I was writing about what I'd been through as a teacher, everything that had happened to me, and what so many other teachers have gone through too. But it didn't help. Every post just reopened the same wound. I wasn't healing, and I wasn't having fun. So one day, I deleted everything. And the very next day, I made chili, and the idea hit me. Now I'm having so much fun. My heart is healing. I get to do what I love, writing thrilling stories that people actually want to read, teach people how to make beautiful meals in their own kitchens, and give them a little scare while I'm at it.
I love that answer, and I remember reading the stories on this publication prior to the transformation into the Graveyard Kitchen, and I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, what was there before was fantastic and very real and genuine, but I can tell since the switch that the writer's having a lot more fun here with these stories. And again, the combination of recipes and storytelling is just brilliant and it's super unique. So I wholeheartedly endorse that transformation there. I think it was a great idea. Number 8: Do you have a favorite recipe out of the ones you've currently published?
Sweet and sour meatballs, no question. I could eat them every week, and sometimes I do. I also love my homemade bread. Honestly, everything I make is good. I don't post anything unless it turns out exactly how I want it.
That's fantastic. That's the benefit of being the author. I love it. Number 9: Are you working on any projects outside of Substack that you'd like to share?
Right now, I'm really just having fun with The Graveyard Kitchen. Funny thing about that name, it's not just a title. The graveyard is my career. I left teaching and I'm not going back. Bits and pieces of that life are buried, and honestly, cooking became how I coped with that loss. I've always believed the best way to the heart is through the stomach, so when my heart broke, I started making more elaborate meals. That's how The Graveyard Kitchen came to life. Maybe eventually I'll look into getting a cookbook published or write a novel, but I don't really see that happening, honestly. This is the first thing I've done in a long time that makes me happy, not because I have to, but because I want to.
And that's what it's really all about. Feeling like you have to do something, or that it's just a job that you have to deal with. It'll quickly drain you of your energy. So I love that this is kind of fueling the passion, and it's making you happy. So that's fantastic. Number 10: Which story or recipes would you recommend readers try first, especially if they're not experienced cooks?
Start with the lasagna. It sounds fancy, but really, it's just browning meat, layering cheese, and pouring sauce. It's much easier than people think it is. And the more it's made, the easier it becomes. I want to say thank you to you, Bradley Ramsey, for taking the time to interview me and for always rooting for writers and celebrating the little victories. I'm just a middle-aged mom cooking in the kitchen, writing psychological thrillers, and dreaming about revenge. And I love that I get a little platform here to do it. I guess in a way, I'm still teaching, only now I'm teaching readers how to cook really good meals right in their own kitchens and letting them have a little fun along the way. Just a reminder, everything is in sequence. Start at the beginning and let the story simmer.
Amazing. I love that final part about, start at the beginning and let the story simmer. I think that's really good advice. And yeah, as always, I love doing these interviews. I love having all these different kind of writers on the show and everything, and creatives in general, because you really get to learn so much about the people behind the stories and the stories behind the stories as well. So thank you to the Graveyard Kitchen for sending in these amazing answers. And thank you once more to the prompt goddess, Sarah Rush, for coming on the show to read them for us.
Anytime.
All right, and back to the show. And thank you again to the Graveyard Kitchen for sending in those wonderful answers. Next up, Echoes from the Void, with Voidy.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Hey there, Voidy.
Hey, Bradley. How did everyone like the Cuttlefish romance excerpt from last week?
Oh, they loved it.
Ha ha! I knew it.
So, this week we've got 2 questions, both from Jimmy Daleson. The first question is, what are some tips for writing multiple character storylines without the larger getting convicted and lost?
Hey, wait a second. Why is one of the characters getting convicted? What did they do?
Oh, you know what? I think that's actually probably an autocorrect or a typo. I just copied and pasted this from the chat thread. Let's assume that should have said convoluted. So it would read, what are some tips for writing multiple character storylines without the larger getting convoluted and lost?
Oh, I was going to say, just don't have them commit the crime in the first place.
Yeah, that would work. But back to the question. In my case, my current cosmic horror novel that I've been writing for more years than I'd like to admit has 6 different POVs. So I think I can help out here since I like doing multi-POV stories. As much as I'm a serial pantser, one thing I'll say is that in this case you need an outline. I'm not advocating for an outline so rigid that you can't let inspiration strike, but you should, at the very least, have an idea of the order in which the characters or POVs will appear and how they ultimately connect or meet up. A sort of map like this will ensure that everyone gets equal time on the page, and it'll ensure that they seamlessly connect or cross paths the way you intend in the story. Another tip here is to really sit down and think about what makes each of these characters unique if you're doing multi-POV stories like this. Like, I love these, but you need to make sure that each of the characters makes sense and brings something to the story. So, let's say you have 3 POVs. If you take one of them out, does the story still work? If so, then you may not need all 3, but 2 instead. Try to understand what each one is bringing to the story, and beyond that, try to write down a few questions like you're interviewing them. Write their answers as well, and you'll see how their voice kind of is unique and comes through on the page, and that will ultimately make them feel unique when you're writing from their perspective as well. Hey, Voidy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, don't have them commit crimes. Then they won't get convicted.
Voidy, I told you that was a typo.
I'm just saying.
Fine. Okay, second question from Jimmy is, how do you write humor that's actually funny? Do you toss out jokes that are funny according to you and hope everyone else goes along? And this is a good question. Comedy and humor are incredibly subjective. There's never going to be a joke that makes everyone laugh, for example. It's important to remember that from the get-go, humor is subjective, and if you try to, make everyone laugh, you're just going to drive yourself insane.
Hey, I have a question. Does this question imply that you're funny?
Well, I'd like to think that, some of my stuff is funny, but anyway, no. Honestly, my brother once told me that my style of humor is just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, so I don't know, honestly. And here's the thing, I don't keep track of which jokes hit or miss. I honestly don't think that's healthy if you're trying to write comedy. It's more about sticking to your style and trusting that your audience will find you.
Yeah, okay, but what if nothing you write is funny?
Well, I mean, there are best practices when it comes to comedy. They have to, they say after all that brevity is the soul of wit.
Huh, that's news to me. My jokes usually have a prologue and an epilogue. They're not short, that's for sure.
Well, it's just one of those things with comedy where it's consistency and confidence that are key. If you think it's funny and that comes through on the page, that energy can be infectious.
I feel like I should say something funny here.
Yeah, that would be good. You got any jokes on hand or anything?
Oh, you mean cuttlefish jokes? Haha, absolutely. Wouldn't be much of a cephalopod if I didn't have a library of cuttlefish puns.
No, Voidy, I meant...
Did you hear about the guy who got a tattoo of a cuttlefish?
No, I didn't.
He got inked up.
Okay, that's not bad.
How many tickles does it take to make a squid laugh?
Voidy.
10 tickles. Get it? Tentacles?
Yes, I get it. But somehow I doubt our audience is composed of cephalopod pun lovers. But honestly, who knows? Anyway, thanks, and I'll see you next week. Alright, well, hopefully you're all still here after being assaulted with squid puns. This next week on Substack, we'll have a new power-up prompt, and even though I'm a week behind myself, I'm going to work on the 5th Divine Prelude, which will be based on this last week's power-up prompt with the Floating Isles. I'm also hoping to catch up on some prompts that I missed in general, including Mina Howell's 3rd visual mask prompt, and the joint horror prompt she did with Edward Marlowe Ruiz that immediately gave me an idea for a story set in my horror mythos. And this one in particular will also tie directly into my upcoming animated series that I'm writing, set there as well. We'll see. As I mentioned, I've got some projects spinning up here this week that I can't talk about just yet, but I'm definitely excited to share more when I can. I'm also already brainstorming a 30-day challenge for August, so stay tuned for more on that as the idea comes together. And that's all I've got for this week. It's crazy. I announced that the Saved as Draft podcast surpassed 10,000 downloads probably about like a week or two ago. And right before recording this, I noticed we're already past 12,000. So once again, I just want to say that I'm really grateful for all of you. I appreciate your support, coming here and listening every week. It really means a lot to me. And, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, a great weekend, and a productive week of writing ahead, because you really do deserve it. And thank you again for all your support. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Hey, Bradley, guess what? Voidy told me a bunch of puns. It got me thinking. Oh no, not you too. What does a chef say when he needs a knife? What does he say? Get me the chopper! Ugh, that's it, I'm leaving.